I hear people all the time say, we're family. Well, I don't know about you, but a lot of dysfunctional families out there.
We talk about that all the time. Everybody comes to me like, "We have a core value of family," and I was like,
How's
"Tell me about your family."
right, how's that working?
Yeah.
But we do need those differences. My wife is my exact opposite in personality.
Mm,
That causes tension from time to time, which is actually good because we value each other. She values what I bring to the relationship, and I value what she brings to the relationship immensely. I have her edit everything I write and speeches that I give. Why? Because I want to make sure that I'm reaching an audience that I don't naturally think about.
yeah.
That she sees and hears things that I don't see and hear, and so that's information that helps me to learn that I wouldn't have if I had someone that thought just exactly like me.
I am so excited about today's guest because he is not only a personal friend of mine, but he is a mentor and a coach to me. He has given me so much insight, so much education on understanding how people work, how they tick, what makes people effective on one team versus another, and how we can start making better hiring decisions and better team building decisions so that we can have the most effective, most productive people on our teams, helping us grow our business. So join me in welcoming to today's show, Spencer Horn with Altium Leadership. Hey, Spencer, it's so good to have you back. It's been probably a couple years since I had you on my podcast, and we talk frequently, but so excited for today's conversation. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. It has been a lot, although it hasn't been that long since you were on my show.
That is true. That is
I think it
true.
was January, right? And you were a great guest.
Yeah, that was. I love podcasts just in general. So, and you and I, when we talk, because we talk regularly, for those of you who don't know, Spencer is a mentor of mine, and he's been just critical in helping me understand human behavior and how to build teams, and I love it. So I'm so excited to have him here to interview him today. But we talk on a regular basis, and sometimes we're both at a point where like, I gotta go. Like I can't talk any longer right now. We connect and we think alike on so many things. So Spencer, thank you again for being here. I want to ask you, and I think this will set the tone for the rest of the episode. When it comes to hiring people, right? Like that's pretty much all we get to hire right now is people. And as we grow our businesses and we bring new people on to the team, what is a myth that's just perpetuated out there about making hires or finding good people? What's something that our listeners are like, oh yeah, I already know that, but it's not true. You can just shatter for them right now and say, hey, this is what we're going to talk about today.
Well, I don't know if I can say that there's this myth that I would call out, but I'll tell you there's behavior that is problematic that I'll call out. So I have a client. This is in the medical field, and the HR department, when we really started to look at their hiring, was really problematic because they didn't have a process. What they were doing was hiring people that they got along with,
Mm,
people that they enjoyed talking with.
yeah.
And so I think if there was a myth, it would be, hey, let's hire people that are fun in the interview and that we get along with, because that means the culture will be great because everybody will be like us.
Mm.
And so in a way, they're introducing bias to the organization. And the bias can be not only from the leaders, but from the hiring managers. So I think that could be certainly one of the
Wow.
and I see that over and over. And it was seriously a problem for the organization. We'll talk about it in a second.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I mean, I could probably think of 5 or 6 instances right now where I've worked with a client and they're like, I thought they were going to be the best hire. We went to the same college. We rooted for the same football team. He came in, he was driving my favorite car, like, or whatever. And we think that because we have similar interests, that they're going to be the right person for our team. I think that's a huge myth. that we can definitely shatter.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, in this organization specifically, nonprofit children, a cancer foundation that treats children with cancer, and so they would find people that were passionate for the cause, but a lot of times they had a personality trait that caused other problems. They were conflict avoidant, and they typically had lower extroversion, and so they would not engage with the doctors, and so they perpetuated this problem because they said, "Oh, these are our people." And they had so many cultural issues as an organization that was causing
Mm.
people to leave. Well, today they're one of the top 5 nonprofits in the entire United States because they learned how to get over that problem.
Wow. So if it's not a good idea to hire people that are like us, same interests that we have fun with, and that we would definitely want to hang out with on the weekends, what are we supposed to do instead?
Well, that's a great question. I think you need to understand what it is that you want to accomplish as an organization, as a culture.
Mm.
And for example, in this organization, they wanted to have the doctors and the nurses, the healthcare providers work together to cure cancer. I mean, that sounds fairly obvious, right?
Yeah.
But they were getting in their own way, left, right, and center every single day with just how they stepped on each other's toes, how they dealt with conflict, how they dealt with stress and problems. And as stress would build up because of some of their behavioral traits, they wouldn't address it.
Mm.
And so and I know that when you avoid distress, it actually causes more distress. And so just by hiring more of those same people, the tension just kept building and building until they kind of realized, well, this is the problem, and they had to take drastic efforts to change. And one of the small changes that they started to make, it's not that they were completely diverse, because there are certain people that are drawn to the healthcare industry that have certain traits, and that's natural. But they found that if they hired people that had higher extroversion, that they were able to actually talk through some of those challenges. And so they looked for certain traits that they could, because they had a goal of the kind of culture that they wanted to create. Now, that's not to say that everybody in the organization is going to have those same traits, because you have people in finance, you have people in the labs. I'll give you another example. They had somebody in their lab that was that's where they mixed all their medicines for
Sure.
cancer treatment. And they have to have high standards for cleanliness and process. And I mean, I'm not remembering all of the certifications that they have to have, but if they miss anything, then they can be shut down and they can't operate.
Wow.
They can't mix their medicines, and it's that serious. They put out, kids are dying. So they failed. They had an investigation, if you will, or a certification, and they failed. And so they went to talk to the person in charge of the lab. And what they found was, this person says, I am following all the procedures, Ryan. They swore up and down that they were following all the procedures. So they put a camera in the lab and they watched. And what they found was, it was true. This person was doing everything, but out of order, because they just decided they had what's called low conformity. The rules didn't apply to them. And because they had low conformity, they say, I'm doing everything, I'm checking all the boxes, but they did it out of order. And that was disastrous. And so the goal was to find somebody in that role that would follow the process exactly and not say, hey, I can figure out a better way because I know better. So I know I didn't answer your question, but sometimes, and I will answer that, but sometimes you need to have certain personality traits, behavioral traits that fit with the role. So first of all, you need to define what that is.
Yeah.
And then to answer your question, I think there's a problem if we hire people that we love to hang out. Listen, it's great to be able to hang out with people, but we don't learn anything new when we just hang out with people that think exactly like us. You and I have very similar goals, and we have some personality traits in common, but I learn a ton from you. Why? Because you're doing different things than I am. If we were both doing the same things, I couldn't learn from you and you couldn't learn from me.
Yeah.
The same goes with thinking. If we have to solve simple problems, it is great to have people that think like us. Why? Because we can jump in and get into rapport and fix problems right away. But if the problems that we face are complex and and are really challenging, which I believe most organizations are facing complex challenges today, it helps to have people that think differently than you.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm hearing you talk about this, and the big picture is what I'm getting out of this is you've probably heard this saying, right? If you fail to plan to fail.
For
And you
sure.
talked about having a process for hiring. You talked about knowing who you want before you start looking for them. You talked about being able to assess, are they going to be right for the position that we're looking for? And I know you probably didn't use all those words, but I mean, I'm hearing all of this, and it's absolutely spot on. It's what we do over at Core Matters, is the whole process side of things. But if you just go out and say, we need to hire somebody, can you find me a lab technician? And that's all you say.
Right.
Well, you'll probably get a lab technician that'll do it out of order, that won't conform, or
Oh my gosh. And that can cause tremendous pain for the organization and your clients who are depending on you.
oh, and in this example, I mean, they mixed the medicine wrong. Like, someone could die. Like, those are life and death situations.
Yeah.
We run into that in construction a lot. You don't follow the safety rules. Those are life and death situations.
So true. So same with the trucking industry, which is blue collar industry. Their organizations were having really big challenges with certain drivers with safety,
Yeah.
and what they found was that those were the drivers that had low conformity. So they started, for their drivers anyway, started looking for people that had higher conformity, so that
Wow.
they would follow those safety regulations. So having that goal is very important. There's one more story that I would tell, I think, that fits with this, and you're probably familiar with it. I think it has to do with like Southwest Airlines. I mean, you're there in Phoenix, and so the culture that they have attempted to create. But I remember someone was interviewing their chief people officer, and they were talking about how they hired a director of IT, and this person had all the credentials that they needed to have, checked all the boxes, except for the cultural side. And what they found is this person was being greeted by all the friendly Southwest people. And when the chief people officer asked him at the end of this first day, so how was your day? He says, it was great, except for everyone keeps interrupting me and welcoming me to the company. And they realized that they'd made a mistake. Why? Because when they put out a job for hiring, they have thousands of applicants because of the culture.
Yeah.
And if the word gets out that the culture is negative because of someone like this IT person who's grumpy about people greeting him, they're not going to be able to have that many applicants because they're not living their culture. They fired him right away because they realized they made the wrong hire.
It's interesting in that story that you just gave about Southwest Airlines. People always talk to me and they're like, well, yeah, there's all these people that have toxic cultures. And I say, you know what? Toxicity in a culture is very subjective. He was probably looking at that culture and saying, how does anybody get anything done around here? Like, they're all just having fun and they're like not doing work. And like, but Southwest Airlines, I mean, part of their vision is to just be one of the happiest, friendliest places to work. Like, that's what they want. And to him, he was like, this is a mess, and good for them.
And we didn't talk about the fact that I got stuck before Christmas because their systems are so antiquated that they couldn't
Because they're
deal
so
with
focused on culture. They're like, we don't need computers. We got people.
So, yeah, it could exactly be the cause. And I had to rent a car I was on the news because we
No,
rented
I
a car with two
know.
total strangers
Yeah.
just to get home in a snowstorm because I wouldn't have gotten home for Christmas because of that.
And you made some great friendships with people. Like, I remember reading the article on that and driving cross country in the snow because your airlines were stuck.
Yeah, so isn't that interesting? But they had a goal, and maybe
Yeah.
that maybe there's some challenges to that. But problems are complex. We do need people that challenge us and think differently than us,
Yeah.
and that's uncomfortable though because we spend so much time at work. We want it to be. I hear people all the time say, we're family. Well, I don't know about you, but a lot of dysfunctional families out there.
We talk about that all the time. Everybody comes to me like, we have a core value of family. And I was like,
How's
tell me about your family.
Right? How's that working?
Yeah.
But we do need those differences. My wife is my exact opposite in personality.
Mm.
That causes tension from time to time, which is actually good because we value each other. She values what I bring to the relationship, and I value what she brings to the relationship immensely. I have her edit everything I write and speeches that I give. Why? Because I want to make sure that I'm reaching an audience that I don't naturally think about.
Yeah.
That she sees and hears things that I don't see and hear, and so that's information that helps me to learn that I wouldn't have if I had someone that thought just exactly like me. Because then I would have that confirmation by, oh yeah, you're great. It sounds
Yeah.
great. Just go out and do it. And then I put my foot in my mouth, which I frequently do.
My wife, I do the same thing with my wife. She reminds me all the time that most people aren't like me.
Right.
And most people aren't comfortable hearing from someone like me. So I have to be really careful. She reviews all my stuff. I'll even have emails and I'm like, can you read this? And she's like, what is the purpose of this email? Because this is going to upset
This is
somebody.
bad, Ryan. But so yes, I need that, and you need that.
Yeah.
And that's
We
a
all
form
do.
of diversity that we hear so much about DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is really important. But there's another type of diversity, and that's diversity of thought and behavior.
Yeah. And we see that too. I tell people all the time because I want to talk about ProScan here in a minute. I want to share that with our listeners. But
Sure.
people always ask, they're like, well, wait a minute. I don't like conflict in the workplace. And we can have the whole debate. And I agree. I agree with you that conflict is good. Tension is good.
Yeah,
But there's a healthy kind of conflict that we need to be having.
that's right.
But when it comes to people's natural tendencies and their behaviors, whether you hire someone that's just like you're going to have conflict and tension. Or if you hire someone that's completely the opposite of you, you're going to have conflict and tension. And what I found in the work that we do is that often we need to hire more people that are not like us than people that are like us. Because the things that are not going right in the organization, if we hire people just like us, are going to continue to not go right in the organization.
That's right. What I want our listeners to understand is when you hire people that are
Stop turning away work, burning out your team, and working so hard. Learn about the proven process that businesses everywhere are using to save time, save money, and hire all the people they need. We'll train your team to implement and run this process in-house so you can grow as fast as you want. Book a call with our team at corematters.com.
aren't like you, it's going to require adaptation,
Sure.
which requires energy. And I think a lot of times what's happening, Ryan, in organizations right now is that change is happening so fast. They're not always changing, but change in the marketplace and the economy, the desires of our customers, just the realities of the workplace are changing. And organizations have to change so fast. We're doing it shorthanded. Companies are screaming for people. They want them now, so they just sometimes get anybody who's there. And that's a problem.
Yep.
But it's taking so much energy that they are looking for an environment that they don't have to think or be challenged because they're exhausted. And so the answer is not to say not have conflict. The answer is not to have people that are different than us. It's to learn how to be able to adapt so that it takes less energy.
Yeah.
So that we can fight the fight that we have to fight every day with people who are aligned with us in terms of the culture and the goal. And we have enough trust in the organization that we can see when somebody says something that we may not agree with, that we respect them and they're not attacking us personally. And when we get to that, instead of being, frustrated and offended at everybody who thinks or acts or behaves differently than us, I think what we'll be able to do is preserve some of the energy. I mean, the purpose of being in a comfort zone and why the brain creates neural pathways is because it wants to save and conserve energy.
Mm.
So people resist change because change takes energy. Dealing with people that are different than you, which will allow you to change, takes energy. So I think part of the opportunity for us is to understand that it's going to take energy.
Yeah.
It's going to take energy if you avoid conflict because it's going to take more energy later.
Yeah.
There's a continuum of conflict. We have conflict avoidance on one side and warfare on the other, right? But the level of conflict we want to have is really in the beginning. It's just creative tension.
Yeah.
So if you think of a violin, in order for violin to make beautiful music, there has to be some tension on the strings.
Mm.
If it's too much tension, the string breaks and you can't play. But if there's no tension, you don't make music. So we're talking about a level of creative tension that is focused on cognitive disagreement, not affective. In other words, if I disagree, I'm not disagreeing with you as a person. I'm challenging your ideas.
Yeah.
And that's what we call cognitive conflict instead of affective conflict, which is I don't like you, I don't like your personality, and so I'm attacking you.
Yeah.
Instead of challenging or questioning your idea.
And then that could actually be another episode for us where we talk about how communication and the way you communicate and who you communicate with and how they receive what you're communicating can create some of that effective conflict that you're talking about versus that cognitive conflict. But hey, I want to, one of the things I like to do on this show is I like to put a tool or a technique or even a piece of gear into someone's tackle box by the end of the show, something that they go, you know what, when I get back to the office, because I assume that a lot of people are listening to this in the car, right? That's when I listen to podcasts. So
Yeah, for
people
sure.
like me are probably doing the same thing. But when they get back to the office, they say, you know what, I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go learn about that because that's something that I think could really bring value to our organization and to our team. There's so many that we could share, but one of them that I love most is ProScan. That's how you and I we started talking after we met and you introduced it to me and I use it every day and I use that information every day. And I know you do too. Tell people real quick, what is this ProScan that we're talking about and how do they use this in their business?
So the ProScan is an incredibly accurate and effective leadership and communication survey. And I call it a survey because it's not a test. Some people have a challenge with assessments or tests, and there's a lot of great ones out there, and I've used many of them, and I know you have as well.
Yep.
It's just, quite frankly, one of the best and quickest that I found.
Every time I find a new one, and somebody's like, oh, this is the best one, and I go play with it, and I have this shiny new toy to play with, after a couple of weeks, I'm like, drawn back to ProScan almost every time.
So there's a lot of money to be made in assessments because, people want to know and understand. And I think a lot of times, Ryan, people use them incorrectly. And so even if you have an okay assessment, it's the way that you use it. And so I always say that the magic is never in the wand. The assessment is a wand. The magic is in the magician. It's in you, Ryan. It's in the practitioners that use this. So it's not enough to use a great tool, but it certainly helps if you have one. So it's one of the best I've found. But how I use it and what I'm so passionate about is I want to use this tool not only to identify your strengths, because that's the feel-good stuff, right? I mean, people are excited to learn and be affirmed that, this is who I am and this is how I behave. You kind of already know that. But why we want to use this tool is to figure out how you're getting in your own way. What are your blind spots to hiring? The confirmation bias that we've been talking about. What are the blind spots that you have to creating change? If you have an executive team that has a certain makeup, and I do this all the time. I'm on a board. I'm actually the president-elect here of the National Speakers Association, the Mountain West chapter. And we had a board retreat recently. And so I did ProScans on the entire board because we had to solve a big problem that had to do with our bylaws. Ryan, 82% of the board had the same high trait. And it was extroversion, which is a huge problem for us to get any details done.
It does make sense, though, that you're all speakers. But yes, I get it.
Well, on this board. And some of the best speakers are low extroversion. They're just so thoughtful and prepared and knowledgeable. But in this case, we had a very specific problem to solve. And so knowing the information on the board, we pointed it out and said, all right, here's the makeup. What are the problems that this could cause? And they're like, oh, we're going to get all over the place. We're not going to be focused. And like, okay, great. What are we going to do about that? What we're going to do is we're going to empower the other two people on the board that are completely different to keep us in line. And we're going to defer to them when we're all thinking the same way to speak up and actually say something that is not an agreement so we can think about it. You actually have to have, the defense and the prosecution. You can't just have everybody for the prosecution, everybody for the defense. We need to make the best decisions. We need to hear contrary opinions.
Mm.
And I know in America right now, we want everybody to think like us, but we actually need contrary freaking opinions.
Yeah.
And so we empowered those people, and we laughed at ourselves when we got off track. Oh, there it is. And so that allowed us to get back on track because we had set the expectation in advance. We understood our strengths, which were in this case a weakness,
Yeah.
right? And a blind spot for getting the job done. And we came up with a plan to be able to solve that. So that's one way that you can do this. Now, one other thing is the most effective leaders, and this is based on tons of research. And some people say there are 4 leadership styles. Some say there are 7. I'm going to share with you 6. Okay. There's a coercive style. There's an authoritative style. There's a pace-setting style. There's an affiliative, coaching, and a democratic. And all of those are very, very different. What I've found, Ryan, is that most leaders have a strength in 2, 3, or 4 of those and are struggling with the other 2, 3, or 4.
Mm.
But in order to be the best leader possible, you need to be able to adapt. So think of the game of golf. I mean, there's like 12 or 14 clubs that you can use, right? And they're all used for different situations. You cannot tee off very well with your putter.
Mm-hmm.
You could. You're going to have many strokes before you get to the result that you want. And you can probably not putt with your wedge or your driver. You need to bring out a different tool. You talk about tools in your toolkit. Here's one. You need to be able to learn to adapt your leadership style to who you're talking to and the situation that you have. You cannot do crisis management with command and control or the coercive style all the time.
Mm.
You cannot be democratic all the time. Why? Because sometimes you need to make a decision where you don't have the time to hear all the voices and you need to be willing to do that. But sometimes you do need to be democratic.
Yeah.
And so what we struggle with is how do we balance and adapt? And that's change, right?
Yeah.
So we as leaders individually need to be more diverse in our thinking and our behavior, but we need other people on the team that can bring this out of us. Last story we had, I know we're running short on time. This is how we get, you and I, but I had a guest on my podcast, Scott Hamilton, who is a multi-gold medal winner in men's figure skating for the U.S. Really interesting man. And, he was telling about his story. And the thing that aligned exactly what I'm talking about here, he said that when he got to the point where he was second in the world, and it took him a long time. He was talking about I was 11th and 9th in the U.S. I was terrible, in his words. Right? He got to the place where he was second in the world. The number one skater had strengths that were Scott's weaknesses. They were what's called compulsory figures. That was his worst element, where he had to do the figure eights and all that kind of stuff. And he decided that he was going to embrace compulsory figures. Now, he was never number 1 at them, but he was number 2 or number 3 at those. So he strengthened his weakness, which allowed him to win the gold medal. And he tells his kids all the time, what is the greatest strength? Lack of weakness. So often we have these tools like Strengths Finder. Those are great if you want to just, it's like eating candy. When we have a behavioral assessment that tells us what we already know, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But if we have something that tells us how we show up under stress and what are the challenges that causes for the team, for the culture, for the solving of complex problems on our teams, that's helpful. Because then we can begin to make incremental changes in our behavior, not our values, not our beliefs, but our outward behavior that gets the best results.
I want to go back and touch on something you said that was just so profound for me, and I want to make sure that our listeners catch it, is that these surveys are not designed to put you in a box.
Right.
It's not okay to come back and says, well, I'm high dominant, so everybody needs to submit to me. That's not how we use
a painful culture.
I love what you said, though, in that it helps you with being adaptive in how you communicate and relate with others. So what I heard in that, and this is what I believe too, is it's more important for me to know your style
Correct.
than it is for me to know mine so that I can adapt and be best suited to be a teammate for you.
Yes.
Versus the other way around, it's like, Spencer, sorry, I'm dominant. submit before me. It's like, wait a minute, I'm the only person that I can change. And by having that information, having that knowledge is just, I mean,
Yeah.
secret weapon.
Yeah,
if you will.
100%. And the reason we need to know ourselves is to understand where those blind spots are.
Sure.
And so where we need to adapt, not to, oh, congratulations. You know, it's so funny because we put people in boxes just for awareness sake. And we're like, now, isn't this what shows up? And it's all fun and we have fun with that. But then it's like, okay, now what are the problems here? And and when I get people to start to behave the way the most opposite style behaves, it's super uncomfortable for them. And they hate it.
Those blind spots are invaluable. Like when you know them, you recognize them and you embrace them.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll transform a team overnight. I've seen it happen when people recognize their blind spots and everybody owns them. It's amazing.
When they embrace those and start to shift, you're exactly right. Cultures can shift so quickly.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be something that takes years for it to change. And, you know, I found too, a lot of times the people that are the most disengaged on a team, that are still the vocal ones, you know, they still care, but they're disengaged. Once they realize that, wow, other people are going to change so that we can actually work better as a team, I mean, they can show up in ways you never expected. I've seen so many people that they thought were B and C players that they're just like, oh, I wish that person would quit. And all of a sudden, just overnight, it's like, it's a whole new person.
I love that. You're exactly right.
One of the things I do love about the ProScan assessment, and we don't have time to get into it today, but I want to make sure people know the reason I always go back to it. You had talked about the energy requirements. We're either going to put the energy in now, we're going to put the energy in later. And I think that the ProScan survey does such an amazing job on the final report of saying, where are the person's stressors showing up? Where is their energy being diverted or drained? And we can just have such a better understanding of that person and their current environment. And I don't see that in I haven't seen that anywhere else. Maybe it's out there, but I have not seen it. And we both probably have tons of stories about being able to use that information, identify when someone's close to burnout, or why their performance has started to drop all of a sudden. It can call out things that there's no other way to find. And that's
And sometimes, Ryan, it even identifies a health challenge. I mean, someone's like, well, no, I don't have any stress at work or home. And it's like, they had cancer and they didn't even know it. I mean, that's a true story.
I have not seen that one, but I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it.
So it can find so many challenges that it's like, when do you go to get a colonoscopy, right? It's preventative.
Yeah.
So you want to know what the stress is so you can solve the problems before someone leaves. We could talk a whole nother episode on just that alone.
Yeah, like my quick story, we had one of the first clients I worked with, they had a technician who's all of a sudden performance just turned overnight. They had no idea what it was. They ran the survey. They said, hey, you've got a lot of stress here and here. And he starts crying. He's like, I'm going through a really nasty divorce and I thought I was doing a good job of hiding it. And clearly that wasn't the case. And so now they have a conversation and they were able to turn his performance around by just saying, man, we're here to support you. Like, you're a team member. Let us know you're going through this. We will support you any way we can. He got his performance back up within a week or two. It was crazy, even though he was going through one of life's most difficult events. You know,
I love that story, but it gave them the cause to have that kind of conversation that he needed.
Now, Spencer, I mean, we just scratched the surface on your wealth of knowledge around building teams and how to make the right hires and how to communicate with people and everything else. And I know there are people listening right now going, okay, I want more of what Spencer is talking about in my business. You've got a giveaway for our listeners. I'm sure you have a way to get a hold of you if they want more information. I mean, this is absolutely your expertise. And I know that anybody that calls you is going to just have an amazing experience and transformation inside of their business. So how do people get a hold of you and what do you got for them?
Maybe the easiest way is, if you are listening to this, just reach out to me on LinkedIn, Spencer Horn, and message me and say, hey, I was listening to you on the Talent Tackle Box with Ryan, and I'd like to take the assessment, and I'll ask for your email address. I will attempt to give you a link. Maybe we can put something in the show notes.
Okay. Yeah,
but I think the easiest way is if someone just reaches out to me on LinkedIn, Spencer Horn. I'm with Altium Leadership, president of Altium Leadership. That's ALTIUM. Message me, and then I'll respond to you. Say, hey, tell me about this thing. I'd like to test it out, and I'll give you a sample.
And we'll have your contact info in the show notes as well. And just for the record, Spencer's not shy. I don't know if you figured that out yet, but he's an easy guy to find. He's got content everywhere. So, and he's got such great content to share. And I know that's why he's so passionate about it. You know what, Spencer, thank you so much for being on the show again. I've enjoyed it. As always, I mean, this is a longer show for us.
Sorry.
We just had so many great things to talk about. I think I want to do a round 2 here in a couple of months. Like, let's have you back on and finish this up.
Anytime, Ryan. I love being here. Thank you for letting me ramble on. And I really enjoyed being with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Spencer.